the voice of the U.S. pork industry in Washington, D.C., but we also speak on behalf of the producers around the world. We interact with foreign governments, embassy staff in Washington, D.C., the administration, and also Congress. So there are a lot of issues that come up within a cycle where, we really do need to cooperate with all sectors. So it's not just, talking to Congress and making sure that a law is repealed or passed. It also helps to be able to advocate on behalf of the producers internationally. So this slide kind of gives you a good sense of how we're able to work with others. We represent the producers. We are your voice. A lot of times we come to you and we say, hey, we would really love to have a call into such congressman or even an ambassador, and so that you can tell them how what your point of view is on a certain issue. So a lot of times we will turn to the producers to help us with that. But within the pork industry, it's really vital that we're able to do this because we are, like I said, your voice, and this really wouldn't be possible without SIP and the checkoff, the voluntary checkoff that we receive. That's how we're mostly funded as an organization, and like I said, we represent you not only in DC and in the United States, but internationally. MPPC had a really successful year in 2015, and I'm going to go through some of the major points that we were really successful in, not only in trade, but also some of the domestic issues that would have affected you had we not been able to get ahead of them or really help them from progressing any further and damaging your bottom line. As everyone is aware, the country of origin labeling was a really big issue for the last 7 or so years in the U.S. We lost a case in the World Trade Organization, which is an international unit, against Canada and Mexico. And it got so far to the point where they were authorized by this international court body to retaliate or put taxes on U.S. products being exported to Mexico and Canada. This was going to be a very big issue because it was estimated that pork producers would be losing $10 a head. So we were able to really combat this. Not only did we work with the U.S. Congress and other trade organizations, but we were really able to avoid this really big fallout and a tax put onto your products exported abroad. We were a very, very key sector in the U.S. Advocating for full repeal of country of origin labeling, and we were luckily able to avoid this. But keep this in mind because cool is not something that we've been able to get rid of in the last 10 years, so there's some rumors that it might come back up in the future. The other big issue that we were able to pass was and advocate for on behalf of you was Trade Promotion Authority. Now, Trade Promotion Authority is an act of a law that's passed by the U.S. Congress, and it gives the blueprint to our negotiators that are negotiating multilateral trade agreements, and it tells our negotiators these are the key points that need to be addressed within a trade agreement and for the U.S. Congress to pass this agreement. So Trade Promotion Authority was passed last year. It was a very hard lift for us, but it really did help conclude the negotiations of the TransPacific Partnership because it signals to our not only the United States, but Japan, Vietnam, and the others that we're negotiating with that, hey, Congress wants to work on this, and we want the best deal possible. About a year ago, we had the West Coast port slowdown, and it was a slowdown. It wasn't a strike, but inevitably it did affect the industry. It cost us more than $600 million in the few months that it was enacted, and it really did hinder our exports, especially to the Asian markets. So once I get to a couple of the different slides, you'll see how it actually did affect our exports overall. We're trying to really nip this in the bud for the future, and proposing various legislation that would prevent this from happening in the future, and I'll talk about that a little bit further. Another major accomplishment was with Chile and Peru, where we were able to eliminate the trichina testing requirement for chilled pork. This is very important because before we were only able to export pork that had been frozen. And as you know, that commands a lower price on the international market than chilled pork. So this is a very big issue for us because now we're able to export chilled pork, get more value out of your product. Through the negotiations of the TransPacific Partnership, we were able to lift the ban on Malaysia. Also, Singapore allows some use of PRTs, so that's a positive for us overall. One of the major sticking points has always been Codex and trichina for us, and Codex was able to approve guidance on negligible risk for trichina, which means that we're going to be able to have a plan that we show to other countries and tell them, hey, this is what we're doing on trichina, this is why it's not an issue in the United States, and this is why you should accept our products. The other issue that we were very successful in was the Department of Transportation had a new rule for hours of service, and this was going to affect your trucking and hauling of livestock. We were able to get an exemption for livestock, so this for every 8 hours you need a break of 30 minutes. This is not going to apply for livestock anymore. This is going to save a lot of money overall. This is the next one is the Port Performance Act, which is what I had mentioned. This is one of our strategies to ensure that we don't have a slowdown in the ports like we did in the past. A lot of the pushback that we got last year during the West Coast ports issue was, oh, this isn't, everyone's working within their capacity. You know, everyone's really doing the best job they can. We're not on strike. And what this piece of legislation allows us to do is track month to month what we're able to export from a port in Los Angeles on a monthly basis. So if there is a slowdown or a strike in the future, you can actually point to data and say, actually, no. You know, you had X much exports in January 2016, and now 8 months later, you've slowed down this much. This is the harmful effect to the U.S. economy as a whole. So this is a very key piece of legislation that we were able to pass and get through Congress. Mandatory price reporting was also reauthorized last year, was signed into law. This is really helpful for you guys. At the day-end trading will now be part of the next day's reporting cycle. That was one of the positives out of this piece of legislation. Positive train control, the deadline was extended. January 1st would have been the implementation date where any rail service would have been disrupted that was delivering anhydrous. So this applies not only to train cars that are carrying toxic substances, but also carrying passengers. And we were able to get an exemption and an extension on this issue. The CFTC reauthorization, this is still passed in the House. It's being held up in the Senate, but it's a high priority for the Senate Ag Committee. And we're hoping that this is one of the few pieces of legislation that can pass through this very slow 2016 congressional calendar. And last but not least, we were able to get pork back on the prison menus thanks to the efforts of Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa, who's on the Judiciary Committee, which oversees these, the menus or the decisions on what gets to be put as part of prison menus. For a little while, we were told prison inmates don't like pork, they don't want to be they don't want to have it on their menu, so this was pulled, and it was going to cost a lot of money, and we were able to get it reinstated. So moving on to the trade component of the presentation, we keep saying that we're the poster children for why trade works in the United States. As you can see, after the implementation of every free trade agreement, we've seen an increase of exports, of pork exports, and the 2015 data isn't there anymore because there's a lag time. There's a lag time between the reporting cycles, but we went from a net importer of pork in the United States 20 years ago to now a net exporter, where we export close to 27% of our total U.S. production of pork. And that's really key and vital because it really does help add value to your product. For every hog, you get an additional $63 in value added to your pork. This is what I had hinted at. In the last few years, we've had really key exports in some of these markets, and it's been really record-setting. In 2014, our exports were almost $6.7 billion, with our top markets being Japan, Mexico, and Canada. As you can see, because Mexico and Canada are our number 2 and 3 export markets, this is the reason why country of origin labeling was such a key issue for our industry, because if country of origin labeling had taken effect, we would have seen taxes or tariffs put onto our number 2 and 3 export market, and that would have been very detrimental to the industry as a whole. That being said, 2015 is not going to be the best year overall. It's not going to be as good as 2014 was, and that's because of a number of issues that I mentioned. The port slowdown really did hurt us. We weren't really fully able to recover after that. The sanctions on Russia, that really affects us because the supplier to Russia had been the European Union. And now that the European Union and the United States are collaborating on sanctions against Russia, that means that they can't export their products to Russia anymore. So where are they exporting it to? Japan. That's why we've seen a little bit of a negative drop in our exports last year. It's a combination of the sanctions on Russia and the port slowdown, and also the U.S. economy is doing fairly well compared to other economies around the world, and we have a very strong dollar. So we've lost a little bit of that competitive advantage that we've had in the past. The reason why we've been pushing for free trade so many years is shown here, where we as an industry export more pork to the 20 countries with which we have free trade agreements than to the rest of the world combined. It's because we're able to negotiate very good trade agreements and very good deals where we're becoming very competitive overall in the process. So this is why we've been pushing for trade over so many years, is because we see the actual benefits to our industry. It's very, you know, it's all there. Overall, the United States has stayed pretty competitive in their trading, as much as we hear otherwise. These numbers are all from the U.S. Department of Commerce. And you can see that the U.S. trade balance, so this is how much we export versus how much we import, with the countries with which we have free trade agreements, all 20 of them, we have a little bit of a deficit, but that's mostly due to imports of energy. So think of petroleum, for example, or gas. And with the other countries with which we don't have a free trade agreement, we run a very big deficit, and that's because we don't have the same rules that we play with, and we're not able to eliminate some of those taxes that we see, and just a whole variety of issues. In 1975, these were the number of regional trade agreements that were in place in the world. There were some regional trade agreements, a lot of integration within the European community. There was some integration within Central America and South America, but you can see the United States wasn't really part of any of these regional trade agreements, and neither were the Asian countries or Africa. Fast forward 20 years to 1995, we see a lot more integration within the Europeans, our competitors, and also some more integration within the African countries, and a little bit in Asia and a little bit in Latin America. This is what it looked like 2 years ago, in 2014. We can see that the Europeans are being very aggressive with their free trade agreements and their regional trade agreements. They're negotiating agreements all over the world, and they're setting the stage for the rules. So they are putting together the rules that the world is playing by now. There's some integration within also the Asian countries, and a lot more integration in Asia, like I said, the Americas and Africa. But most of the new free trade agreements have been coming out of the European countries, where they've become more embedded, and they've been able to reduce some of those tariffs and scientific barriers to trade, which makes them more competitive overall. This is one of the biggest issues that we've been dealing with, has been the TransPacific Partnership. For over 7 years now, we have been negotiating a Trans-Pacific Partnership. So it's 12 countries altogether: the United States, Canada, Mexico, Vietnam. You can see all of them up there. And it's taken 7 years to close a deal and to finalize an actual trade agreement. The negotiations concluded October 5th of last year. We are really looking to set the rules, not only in the Americas, where we have some of the key players, but also in Asia. This is part of the plan to pivot to Asia and to become more integrated for not only economic reasons, but also political reasons. Like I mentioned, there's 12 TPP members. There's talk of this expanding in the future, but for now, these are the number of countries that are part of it. The toughest issues have been rice, dairy, tobacco, and biologics, meaning pharmaceuticals. So you might hear a lot rumblings from these sectors where they're not 100% happy with how this was negotiated. They're all very valid points, some more valid than others. But for us, the biggest payout was really the SPS issues that we were able to resolve, and I'll get into that a little bit in the future. MPPC is supportive of the deal as it was negotiated. The text looks very good to us, so we've come out in support. Now, being a presidential year, this is what it's shaping off to be. This is how people, how the presidential candidates are positioning themselves in terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Like I said, this is really a big deal for the United States, not only because it helps us shape the rules in the Asian countries, but it also does let us limit the taxes on our exports to those countries. There are a lot more candidates that are opposed to this deal than those in favor, and that has to do with a number of issues, but it's not very encouraging because usually Republicans are the ones that are in favor of free trade agreements because, like I said, it cuts taxes. It's not very surprising that the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Martin O'Malley are against this, and they have their political issues. So what did we get out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership? So far, what we've gotten and these are actual deliverables before the trade agreement has even gone into implementation. So we've concluded negotiations. The text is closed, which means you can't add new information to it, but it does need to get signed, and it also needs to pass through the U.S. Congress. So far, what we have gotten out of it is that Malaysia eliminated all non-tariff barriers. In essence, a de facto ban that had been put on U.S. pork has been lifted, so we're going to be able to export to Malaysia. New Zealand has also done similar. We're going to be able to export pork at the retail level. This is similar to what I mentioned. We command a higher price for chilled pork than we do for frozen pork. So not being able to sell chilled pork has really hurt our sales potential in some of these countries, including New Zealand. And we're going to be able to export and sell at retail. Chile and Peru, we eliminated the trichina testing, similar to what I said. This means that you're going to be able to export higher cost cuts to these two countries, and Singapore lifted its ban on the PRTs. On the SPS front, what did we get out of this deal? Out of this deal, we were able to build on the World Trade Organization SPS standards, but the most important part of this is that we were able to get a rapid response mechanism. This means that if you export pork to Peru and there is an SPS issue that prevents that pork from being offloaded into Peru, scientists will come together to resolve that issue so that your product doesn't sit at a port for weeks on end and spoil and lose its market where it was supposed to go. This ensures that within a quick turnaround, you have scientists that are from both countries coming together and saying, okay, what is your issue? Why are you holding up this product at the port? Can we work something out? And then this really does help prevent slowdowns in your supply chain. And this was a really big deal because there were many countries that wanted this. The United States was not one of them. Even though it makes sense that this is part of it, the industry really had to rally, and the agricultural industry in particular got together and worked with some of the embassies and some of the foreign governments to try to put this into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's very difficult to get something in an international trade agreement when your own government doesn't fully support it. So this was a very big deal for the United States and for specifically for agriculture, which has a shelf life. Vietnam was another success story within the Trans-Pacific Partnership. All pork tariffs are going to be eliminated between 5 and 10 years. It just depends on the pork product, but this is all contingent upon Congress signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So these, as I go through the countries, you have to keep in mind that these won't go into effect until the trade agreement is passed by the U.S. Congress and by a couple of other countries. But it's really important to keep in mind that these right here aren't going to happen until the trade agreement goes into effect, while the other parts that I mentioned were already the trichina testing, for example, in Chile and Peru, that's already happening. We've already settled those issues. Yes. In Australia, this is still an ongoing issue that we have, and much like in New Zealand. In New Zealand, our biggest issue was that we couldn't sell at retail, and the Australians are saying the same thing. The top agricultural export to Australia is U.S. pork. Even though we can't sell at the retail level, we can't sell their chilled pork, we still export tremendous amounts to this country. And we're trying to resolve this through working not only with the government of Australia, but also the U.S. government, where we're developing a plan. We've developed a plan, and now we need to implement a plan for a risk assessment to figure out exactly what their biggest concerns are. They've told us that the restrictions are related to PRRS and post-weaning systematic wasting syndrome. You know, this could be one of those things where once these two things get resolved, who knows, there might be something else, but for the time being, the Australians are very key to working with us and resolving this issue. This has been a pretty good development, because in the past they haven't been as key to work with us on this issue. In Malaysia, we're going to be eliminating all pork tariffs upon entry into force. And like I said, if Congress doesn't pass this, none of this will happen. Malaysia has also eliminated all non-tariff barriers to U.S. pork. So this is one of the deliverables that we were able to get out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. In Singapore, we're still working on a side letter, which means that even though the text has been negotiated and there can't be any further changes to it, there are still cooperation that happens with countries, and in this case, the United States is cooperating with Singapore on this issue to resolve it, and they're going to put together almost like a memorandum of understanding where they're going to be lifting some of the restrictions on additional PRTs. So we're working on finalizing this letter, which would allow us to export a lot more of our pork to Singapore. Like many of these countries, the issue seems to be trichina, and the worry that we have trichina in the U.S. supply, and we're working to remedy that. I already mentioned New Zealand. It's now going to allow duty-free access For most products, upon entry into force, it'll just take 3 years for one of the harmonized tariff schedule numbers. This is pretty good. We were losing market share in New Zealand. Australia, Chile, and Canada all had market access. They didn't have the same issues that we had, or the New Zealanders didn't tell them that they had the same issues. So we're going to be able to send our product to New Zealand. Chile and Peru, I mentioned this before, but this is a really big deal for our industry just because it sets a precedent where we're able to, through the PQA Plus program, show that, hey, as long as we source from PQA Plus farms, you're going to be able to export pork to Chile and Peru, and it certifies that it does not need to have further trichina testing, or it doesn't need to be frozen. This is a very key point for us because it really does help us negotiate with other countries when we say, hey, you have similar testing requirements that the Chileans and the Peruvians have. You know, they were able to let our pork in. Can you work out something similar to Chile and Peru? So it sets a very good precedent for us. Japan, we got a pretty good deal within Japan. We're going to get all tariffs eliminated on all products between 6 and 11 years from entry into force. The Japanese, from the very beginning, said that pork was one of the 5 sacred commodities that they were not going to negotiate on. So they said, you know, it's off the table. We don't want to talk about pork. We don't want to talk about this. This is too sensitive within our country. MPPC had a very aggressive campaign where they called out the Japanese in Washington and pretty much posted billboards in the metro station saying that the administration prefers Japanese farmers over you. Now tell the administration that they need to negotiate on pork. This worked out very well for us because we were able to negotiate on pork, something that they had said that they weren't going to deal with. And we were able to reduce not only eliminate all tariffs, but the gate price system is also going to be reduced over time. Even though the negotiation was very successful and we were able to get pretty much everything that we wanted, there are some rumors now that there's some additional issues that are coming up in the Japanese market. So we'll keep you posted on that as that develops. Moving away from the TransPacific Partnership, Taiwan. We haven't had access to the Taiwanese market because of ractopamine. They have a ban on ractopamine or beta agonist use in pork. We believe that this is unjustified for the main reason that they allow imports of beef that use beta agonists, and that is completely safe for their population, yet pork that uses beta agonists is deemed to be unsafe. Because of that, we've been keeping a close eye on Taiwan and the developments that might come up. They just now elected a new president this week, and she got into a little bit of some hot water during the presidential debates. Surprisingly, U.S. pork was such a big issue that it came up during the presidential debates, and she signaled that she would be open to imports of U.S. pork that were treated with beta agonists. She got a lot of flack, not only from people around her and the other candidates, but also the Taiwanese pork industry, which was not very happy with that comment. So we're monitoring the situation and see how this unfolds. But like I mentioned, there were a lot of protests, and the Taiwanese pork producers would really love to limit our exports to continue to limit our exports of pork. And we're hoping that the new administration is able to be a little bit more flexible. Within South Africa, we've been very successful so far. They had multiple reasons, China being one of them, why we wouldn't be able to export pork to South Africa. According to Dr. Dermot Hayes from Iowa State, this is a potential to add $40 billion of U.S. pork exports to this new market. South Africa has agreed to drop its ban on U.S. pork. And the reason behind this was South Africa is part of a preference program which allows South Africa to export key products to the United States duty-free. But that preference program needs to be reauthorized by Congress every few years. Now, the Obama administration, pushed really hard, and so did a lot of key members of Congress, to suspend South Africa from those benefits. So, in essence, you don't pay taxes to export your products into the United States, yet you limit how many exports we can send to you. If you want to continue to export without taxes or tariffs, then allow access for U.S. pork and poultry. And after much deliberation and the president suspending South Africa from being part of this preferential program, the South Africans have waved the white flag and have said, okay, we will lift our ban on U.S. poultry and pork, and you will be able to export some cuts of pork to South Africa. So far, this is still pending. They have until March to make sure that they follow through with what they have said they were going to do. And the administration can still, if they don't follow through, the administration can pull their preferential program. So this is, we still have a stick in this case. This was a really huge victory for us, like I said, and we were really able to not only work within the U.S. administration, but also with members of Congress, and kind of work with both to make sure that this went through. And it really does give us a little bit more flexibility in the future. In another trouble area that we have not been able to export to has been Argentina. Argentina, there is no export certificate for U.S. pork, and that has to do with them not wanting to give U.S. An export certificate for a number of issues, including trichina. This is a lot more to do politically than it does with an actual scientific evidence. The Argentines had an election recently. Previous to the election, there was the Kirchners were in power, and they are not very friendly towards the United States. And this was more of a political reason why they didn't want to allow U.S. pork into the country. There has been a change in the government where Mauricio Macri came in from behind and was actually able to win, and he's the new president as of about a month and a half ago. And he has already signaled that he wants to pivot to the United States. He wants to increase relationships with the United States, and has even come out and decried and said some negative things about Venezuela, which is a country that Argentina had always been a partner with. So this is definitely a big shift in Argentina from going from, hey, we're going to be anti-America and support Venezuela, to now, you know what, we don't like some of the things that Venezuela is doing, but we see a future with aligning with the Europeans and the Americans. On the Trans-Pacific Partnership, this is another free trade agreement that we have been negotiating. The United States has been negotiating this for about 1.5 years now. This is the free trade agreement between the United States and the European Union. This is really big for the U.S. to negotiate, and for the pork industry especially, because we don't export much pork or any pork to the European Union. We actually export more pork to the small country of Honduras than we do to all of the European Union combined. So the fact that we've started negotiating an agreement gives us a little bit of hope that we would be able to resolve some of our differences. As you know, agriculture is a very big sticking point in the European Union. They have very strong convictions on their agriculture. A lot of times we don't necessarily agree or see eye to eye on many of their policies, and we're hoping that the Trans-Pacific Partnership will help mend some of those and possibly change their position on their agriculture. Off the bat, the European Union has been very hesitant to talk about agriculture. They actually wanted to pull agriculture from the negotiating table. They wanted to negotiate on, cars and safety and all sorts of different issues. Agriculture was one of the sticking points that they said, this is too complicated, this is too hard, let's not deal with it. The Obama administration has pushed back and said, we will be talking about agriculture. Agriculture is very important to us, and we will have to come to a compromise, and we will have to talk about this. So we're very optimistic. This is very early on where we've started negotiating this, and like I've said, there are a lot of hurdles that we have to pass in order to get a very successful agreement and to be able to finalize this in the future. We've been leading some of the biggest lobbying efforts on the Capitol Hill and in Washington, D.C. We are part of several coalitions with the Transatlantic Trade Coalition, and we've been able to put together various letters that we've sent to the administration and to Congress in support of the negotiation.